Hey guys, so in this video we're going to be talking about Fujifilm's latest camera, the X-T5. I was really fortunate to be given a first look at this camera, to actually pick it up, hold it, walk around, take a bunch of pictures, of course with a pre-production model, but it was pretty exciting and I'm excited to share all of that information with you guys. So I'm going to break this video up into a couple different sections. The first we'll just talk about specs and kind of how that translates into real life. The second section, we're going to talk about ergonomics and all of that. And of course, we're going to get into some pixel peeping. I have a bunch of photos to share with you guys and to kind of see how 40 megapixels stacks up. So if you are new to this channel, welcome. Please consider subscribing. I'm going to be releasing some more X series content. Specifically, I have another video on the XH2 coming out very soon. And I also have a bunch of content on the GFX. That's primarily what I make content on. So if you are curious about 100 megapixels of power, definitely check out some of my other videos. That being said, let's get into the video to start talking about this camera. So Fujifilm is dubbing this camera the return to the roots. And basically, let's just talk about the biggest change first. They are taking their flippy screen that they designed in the X-T4 and they are throwing it away, because now this camera basically feels like an X-T2, X-T1, X-T2. The original, they put back the original three-way tilt screen. You still have all the dials at the top, the ISO, the shutter, and the exposure compensation. They didn't add anything like a digital screen on the top. They're really keeping this camera like true to its core. And they're also, in terms of returning to the roots, this camera is also a little bit smaller than the X-T4. So the X-T4 got a bit beefy. So I think that's a cool direction that Fuji's doing. Personally, I like the XH line, or at least the XH1, where you have that big grip, you have the screen on the top, but I really love the dials. And they took it away on the X-T2, X-T2S, and I think that it's really interesting what Fuji's doing. They're making the XH line a bit more progressive and moving a bit forward with the innovation, and they're clearly going to keep the XT line, the original, the more nostalgic feeling, the more tactile feel where you got the dials and whatnot, and I think that's a really great direction. Aside from the screen, this camera's pretty much the same thing as the X-T4 in terms of the buttons and all of that. Nothing to really report. Everything is more or less the same. They even chose to keep the type of shooting lever, whether you're doing single, continuous, or manual, on the front left. They chose to keep that to the lever style, whereas on the XH2 and 2S, they changed it to a button, where you have basically just press the button repeatedly to cycle through. So I think it's really cool what Fuji's doing. They're keeping true to their roots. I think a lot of Fuji's fan base are people who, picked up an XT1 or XT2 or an XH1. So on the surface, this is a 40 megapixel camera. It has the same sensor as the XH2, and it features 7 stops of IBIS. It has 2 UHS-2 SD card slots and has a micro HDMI slot, type D. This camera weighs in at about 557 grams or about 1.2 pounds, so very light. Walking around with it, my primary camera before the GFX was an XH1, so camera is definitely a bit heavier. This camera feels extremely small, very light. In terms of size, this camera is about 130 millimeters by 91 millimeters, or 5 by 3.5 inches. With the grip, it is about 2.5 inches deep. So it's a very small camera. And in terms of continuous shooting and whatnot, you'll get 15 frames a second on the manual shutter and 20 frames per second on the electronic shutter. The battery on this camera is the same as the GFX 100S and the new XH2s. It's a bigger battery, so the battery life will be better. And the sensor is a X-Power 5, and it features power saving and whatnot, so you are going to get more frames out of this camera than the X-T4. To specifically break down the frames that you'll get on the battery, if you're using the LCD screen, in the new economy mode, you'll get 740 frames. On the normal mode, you will get 580 frames, and on the boost, you will get 570 frames. So it kind of seems like on paper, If you want to get, if you don't want to shoot on economy, you might as well shoot on boost. I mean, it's pretty similar. If you are using the EVF, you will get 670 frames on economy, 590 on normal, and 500 on boost. So a bit of a difference whether you're using the LCD or the EVF. This camera has updated the autofocus to add subject detection. Deep learning technology helps recognize things like the human face. It has eye detection. It also has animal, bird, car, bike, airplane, and train detection, apparently. Did not really get to check those out, but sounds cool. In terms of the EVF, it has something new called visible against eye position shift. So I guess if you're shifting around, it won't affect anything. I didn't really get a chance to experience that, but sounds cool. The finder magnification is 0.8x. The resolution is 3.69 million dots as well. That's the same as the GFX and I believe as the XH2. For the video specs, you'll get about 6.5K at 30 frames per second or 180 up to 240 frames a second. You'll get 422 10-bit, 360 Mbps, and you can shoot F-Log ProRes and Blackmagic RAW, but it has to be through an external recorder. Also, a couple notes, this does not accept like a cooling fan, so that kind of limits your video recording time. In terms of specs, the things that stick out to me the most are the 40 megapixel sensor, which we're gonna look at in a bit. And I thought it was pretty interesting that Fuji wanted to keep the 2 SD card slots after moving both XH series cameras, XH2 series cameras to Express B slot and an SD card slot. So pretty interesting that they choose to just keep it 2 SD card slots. I'm gonna break up these photos into 3 segments. So the first one we're gonna do is architecture / street stuff. The second one is going to be people, and the last one is gonna be autofocus. So let's jump into this. I have a handful of shots to review and I don't want to make this a super long video, so let's get going. So primarily here, we're just going to be looking through all these photos, and I did have the 56 1.2, the Mark II version. So I don't want to be judging the lens. I really want to be talking more about the megapixels and dynamic range, but inevitably the lens is going to come into play. But yeah, let's start taking a look at this. So if we go to 100% here. Okay, so I think before we get into it, the thing that we want to establish is what is an acceptable level of zoom on this camera. So I could go 200% on my XH1 if it was in the 100% perfect scenario. Like in the studio, you could get 200%, but in real life, you really 100% is probably best. And again, it depends on the shutter speed and all of that. So I have the ISO here. For the most part, I shot close to wide open, if not wide open, and I have the ISO as low as possible. I also have the shutter at 1/2000th of a second. So let's just click on in, start looking around. So with one thing with this lens that you'll also notice, I have a video coming out on the XH2 in a couple days, and that is going to be the same lens. So if you watch that video, you're gonna notice that that lens has a pretty severe drop off. So things like this, where this pillar of bricks and whatnot is a bit soft, that makes sense to me because I know that this lens has a very thin focal plane. So when you're close to wide open. So zooming in here though, pretty impressive. 40 megapixels definitely is not bad. This I thought was a pretty cool shot. This was shot at 1/250th of a second. So again, you can see some drop off here, but you know, the focal point, the point of focus was right here. Pretty sharp. And of course the drop off is pretty big, but the level of detail is pretty refreshing on an X series camera for sure. Bokeh, super nice, of course, as to be expected from that lens. Let's keep moving. Very, very, very sharp here. Let's zoom into 200. Yeah, 200 is a bit, obviously this isn't really usable. You can still see plenty of detail. You have one bolt sharp over here, not too bad. Again, just another building shot. All these shots are unedited, so This is kind of nice. As you can see, this is a bit overexposed here. It was very sunny. But if we bring the exposure down, you can see we have all of that information, which is nice. I don't think this is like the most impressive thing in the world. I'm pretty certain older X series and the XH1 would be able to get close to this, but I think this is pretty impressive. Definitely a big upgrade for sure in terms of dynamic range. That looks pretty nice. If we click on these bricks, super sharp here. Again, we're at 100%. And then of course, dropped off a bit, gets a bit soft. Flag is pretty sharp here. Again, this is a little bright, but you know, nothing you can't really bring out. That's an easy one, of course. This shot I took straight on. I wanted to try to get a shot where the lens would be all in focus, but did not succeed there. Again, we're shooting wide open. I wanted to walk around with the new 23 1.4, but that lens was not available, so making do with what we got. So as you can see, we're zoomed in at 100% here, and if I just click these auto settings, you have all your highlights preserved, which is nice. Like original, exposed for highlights. So definitely impressive for sure on an X series camera. A lot of this building is pretty sharp. You definitely zoomed in at 100%. You can definitely make out people's faces and whatnot. So again, that's really impressive. The dynamic range is really looking pretty good here. This shot, okay, so this shot, obviously you have very extreme light here. So in this garage door, everything is dark in the background. If we hit this auto button here, comes out really nice. Obviously a bit grainy. Just to zoom out a little bit. Pretty grainy. But you know, we did literally come from pure darkness, so I think that's pretty good. Also, if I were to actually edit this photo, I probably would go in the middle. I wouldn't blast it all the way up and make it flat looking. But so if you did like editing it like this, you know, to me, totally acceptable amount of grain here. I wanted to nail this bird in focus, but it looks like it was just a little bit behind the line. I don't want to seem crazy here, but this lens may be a little soft. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is a final production lens or anything like that, but pretty impressive with dynamic range. Let's keep moving. This I took specifically just to straight on, just to look at the level of detail we'll get. Let's hit that auto button. Yeah, very sharp. Obviously, as you move up, maybe I must not have been 100% straight on, but yeah, the level of detail that you get in this camera is pretty extreme. I think, so this is shot, again, this is the original. This is shot at 125, the lowest ISO before you go into the quote unquote low ISO, which you don't want to typically do. This looks a little grainy. So it seems that maybe with the 40 megapixels you do, it is a larger sensor, but with the 40 megapixels, maybe you do get some grain, a bit more grain than usual out of it. If we keep moving, I took this picture of this permit of sorts just to look at some text. So if we zoom in, turn on my do not disturb mode so we don't get those emails. Okay, so we zoom in here, very sharp. We're at 100%. Obviously, it's very odd how this lens does that, but point of focus was right here in the center, so pretty sharp. You're pretty much getting to the level where if we keep zooming in, like you could see, you know, the actual imperfections of the type that the human eye really can't see. So back to 100. I think this is really nice, pretty impressive for sure. If this was in a studio, this body, 40 megapixels, you'd be doing some good work there. Okay, took a car shot. So the focus hit on the rear of the car. You have a bit of chromatic aberrations here, but let's not go too deep into that. But again, the level of zoom we're doing is pretty neat. 200%. You can really see some details. Let's hit the auto button here. 200. Let's do 100. Very sharp here. For the narrow blade of focus, I mean, this is hyper sharp. And if we bring this down, you still have all that information in the highlights. That's pretty impressive, I think, because this is completely blown out. I don't think if you were on an X-H1, older XT, you would get this level of dynamic range for sure. Again, this shot I took straight on just to kind of see corner sharpness and whatnot. So let's bring this up a little bit. Again, I'm not trying to turn this into a lens review here. We're mainly talking about the body, but pretty sharp. Very sharp. Very sharp in the top. I think the bottom corners are a little soft, but it must have been on a slight tilt with the camera. But very impressive. The level of detail here is solid. This is 40 megapixels. It's really nice. Keep moving here. Again, this is just a super narrow plane of focus. If we bring this down, we have all the highlights preserved, of course. That seems to be the trend here. Of course, if we zoom in, very sharp. So here, let's hit the auto button. Again, really impressive. This was a really bright area. This was not. And I exposed here for, I guess, the shadows. So in hitting that auto button, this is impressive for sure. We could bring up the shadows all the way. If we click in here, very impressive. The dynamic range is really checking out on this camera for sure. And this is the first time I'm reviewing these photos. Obviously I sorted them, but I didn't edit these. I didn't really review them. So I didn't really hardcore take a look. Really nice. So in this shot, looks like the shadows are decently exposed, and this is a bit bright. I would expect this to come down pretty perfectly. Nothing too challenging here. Just a lot of leaves and stuff. Yeah, this shot looks a little soft, but in terms of dynamic range, not bad. Pretty impressive. We bring out the shadows more. Yeah, this is solid. I'm pretty impressed with this. Okay, so as you can see here, the highlights are a bit blown out. Let's hit the auto. Let's bring this down just to take a look. And that's definitely very solid. Really, I'm not seeing any areas here that are overexposed. Well, yeah, I think that's paint. No, that's some sort of reflective. You got one thing here, but that's it. This is pretty impressive, the dynamic range here. And if we bring it back out, the level of zoom, again, also impressive. Hit the auto button. Let's bring the highlights down. Obviously I'm just editing these just to show how everything's looking. But yeah, solid. Again, all the highlights here preserved. Nothing is blown out. Even at that point of white. I took this shot of a street, hot dog truck. If we zoom in here, you can see that the focus hit on the last thing of ketchup. Very sharp, as we could expect. I have another one. Let's hit the auto button again, bring the highlights down. I redid it to hit focus upon the first one. You have a pretty nice drop off here. So if you really wanted this to be the point of focus, the main thing in the photo, and some of this chicken is pretty sharp. Let's just take a look here. This is shot at 1.2, so again, little soft here, but if we bring down these highlights, pretty impressive. This was the original. This is what we're at. And we bring down the highlights. As you can see, I don't think we could recover these bokeh. Yeah, these are not recoverable, but you know, unless you're doing like HDR photography, it's not a big deal. Thin plane of focus. Really solid dynamic range. Let's hit the exposure and bring up the shadows. This is pretty sharp. So this was quite a far distance away from what I was taking a picture of, unlike most other things. And everything here is pretty sharp. Of course, nothing is blown out. This is a bit of a hot spot. Let's see if we could wow, yeah, could recover all that detail. I'm really impressed with this dynamic range. This is pretty solid. This, I was just being a jerk, taking an extreme shot with the 1.2. If we bring down the exposure, you can see we have no information lost. All the highlights have information behind them. And if we zoom in here, this is just crazy sharp. We do have a bit of chromatic aberration. Got the teal on this side, the magenta on this side, but as to be expected with the 1.2, really nice, really sharp, and really great dynamic range. I just took this just for the sake of taking it. We zoom in here, really sharp, very sharp, impressive. This side gets a little soft, but if we keep going, very impressive. Nice subject pop, and the background's pretty blurred. Let's keep moving. Bring down the exposure. We have all the highlights, and if we click into zoom, very sharp. I took a picture of this through the fence, so quality here is we're dealing with shooting through a fence, but very sharp, very impressive. This car is a bit bright. Let's see if we can bring it down. Yeah, we have a few small spots on the car that is obviously unrecoverable, but again, this dynamic range is really impressive. Yeah, these letters are really sharp. The A was the sharpest point. Dips off from there. Overall, not bad. This stop sign that it did not shoot through a fence or this traffic light, and bring up some of the shadows here. Not bad. Let's see how much shadows we can recover from inside these. Wow, that's pretty cool. We got everything. This is really impressive. Guys, I shouldn't have bought the GFX. You could have just waited for an X series. I don't mean that, but I half joking. This Intrepid is a bit, yeah, we got all the detail, pretty impressive. Let's take a look at the shadow portion of it. Yeah, we got everything. It's really nice. Let's just do the same. I'm shooting this 5140 wide open, so not everything is fully in focus. Not bad. Let's bring the exposure down. Yep, got all the highlights. I'm impressed. I took this picture of a duck to see how far we could crop in. So last picture, I don't know why this is in the building segment, but So we're at 100%. It's a little soft, but compared to what it would be on a 23 or 26 megapixel, not bad, not bad. Let's see what the shadows look like. Yep, got them all. Cool. So Fuji had some models for us to take some pictures of. So we're going to quickly look through these. So just a quick thing, obviously, just like we noticed in the first segment, all the highlights are pretty good. I think this, even in the sky, as you can see, we have all the blue, which is impressive for sure. But let's just bring this up for the models a bit and click on in. Really sharp, super nice. Obviously, in the street segment, I shot with the 56. It's more of a portrait lens, but hey, what can you do? We just basically walked around taking some pictures. Let's take a look. These highlights over here, super blown out, but let's bring it down. So can't recover them all, but still pretty impressive. Like, I think this would be a level that you would want to include, that you would want to edit down to. So that's not bad, but just to leave so this lens is pretty impressive. Pretty much sharp head to toe, literally. And yeah, not bad. 40 megapixels. Let's see. Now we're at 100. Pretty sharp. You see all the detail in the shoe. We click the auto button here. Just bring this up. Super sharp. You see all the skin tones. Nice background separation. Some detail. This is a nice little interesting flare. Really sharp. So let's see, let's go into 100. Bring down these just so we can see. Yep, all the detail in the shoe. Really nice. Looks like it looks like I slightly missed focus. As you can see, the shoe is really soft. I mean, really sharp right here, but was not super sharp up here. So I'm not sure what I had the autofocus settings on. I wasn't specifically shooting all the models, so not sure. I took this shot. This was like a quick shot where I saw the dogs. They were a bit farther away. Switched to the 50 to 140 here, and I just took the shot. I know if I took this with the XH1, it would not be in focus. So the fact that I'm failing to edit this very quick, but the fact that this dog is really sharp, literally the whole thing is sharp, that's pretty impressive to me. A quick decision to take a picture, and really sharp. So let's see if I can just, we're at 100%. I mean, it looks pretty sharp. The dog was a bit far away, so not bad. Person was not the point of focus. The dog was, so all right. I saw this person walking. I had 5140 on. Not bad. This person walking, let's hit the auto button. Okay, so last thing I want to go over, and honestly the thing I was kind of most excited to test. I should have done more tests like this, but I wanted to test out the focus with burst. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a dog outside and it is really obnoxious. So these shots I just took kind of quick. This was the same spot that the stop sign was at. So this is probably a little soft. Yeah, this is a little soft, but not horrible for what I'm used to. If we zoom in here, click the auto button. This is pretty cool, really sharp, or in focus rather, for kind of a fast moving subject. City bikes move kind of slow, so we're not gonna say that super fast moving, but faster than walking. And then the last two things I have are some examples of some cyclists. This, I just basically found the spot and I just bursted. So if we click to zoom in, impressive, not bad. Whole cyclist is in focus. And then there's something going on outside with those dogs. I have no idea. This shot, also in focus. Let's see, I just kept bursting. So not pretty impressive. Oh, this guy definitely had knee surgery. Pretty impressive. Oh, and there we go. Out of focus, out of focus. So it looks like it handled it well as the cyclist kept going. It went a decent amount of the distance, but as I turned the camera a little bit, it did not hold the focus. So last example, this one I bursted a bit more. So if we click to zoom in, which I love this angle, but if we click to zoom in, this was not shot. This was not in focus. This is not in focus. Not more in focus, but oh no, this hit. So on the third shot, the focus hit. Yeah, the bike is sharp and whatnot. If we keep going, yeah, third shot it hit. Fourth shot out of focus. Fifth shot, nope, 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 and nope. So I'm not sure the settings in which I had this set up in. Again, this was a really quick walk with this camera. So take that for what it is, but just kind of without refining settings, without 100% knowing how to fully work the camera and whatnot. Still impressive, at least from what I'm used to for autofocus. So there you have it. That is my video on the X-T5. I hope you enjoyed it. In summary, this is Fujifilm's brand new camera. It is a 40 megapixel camera. It's got 2 SD card slots. The autofocus is improved. It's got subject detection and animal detection and car and train and plane detection. And it has improved battery. It accepts the newest battery, same battery in the XH series, the 2 series, and the GFX 100S. So if you have both systems, X series and GFX, that's really cool. You can just have one type of battery for all the cameras. This camera is super light, super small. It's not a burden to carry around. It's a really nice camera to carry around. The grip is super minimal. So if you are a fan of the XH cameras and that big pronounced grip, Fujifilm is also selling a grip attachment for this to improve the grip. If you want something a bit larger, it's a bracket that goes on the bottom, so it will increase the size a bit. But I did not try that, so I don't know anything about that in terms of how great it is or how bad it is. But that is something if you want an improved grip. And you also have the screen, which is that 3-way tilt screen that we talked about. That is, you know what to expect from that if you come from any XT camera or even the XH1 or the GFX 100S. Great screen, great function. The only thing that is not great about it is that it does not tilt facing you. So if you're vlogging or recording like this, you won't be able to see yourself. However, if you're using it for a photography camera, phenomenal screen. I love how that screen works. Also, I was pleasantly surprised with Fujifilm's decision to keep the dials. I personally really love the dials. I really loved the XH1 and how it has a dedicated dial for the shutter and all of that. It's just an intuitive way of shooting. You don't have to think about any wheels or anything. You can change much faster than the wheels. I'm a big fan of the dials, so Fujifilm is truly keeping it, return to their roots, small camera, big picture, you know, makes sense what they're doing there. I personally like that. I think in terms of whether or not I pick this camera up, I would want to try this camera out and see how it is with video and autofocus and whatnot. I kind of am in the market for a new camera for recording these videos on. My XH1 is not really cutting it, as you see. The focus was kind of in and out the whole time. So personally, if it does do a good job with video, I would consider it. And I would probably get the grip attachment because personally I do like the larger grip. As we reviewed, 40 megapixels goes a long way. It's no GFX, it's no 100S or 100 megapixels, but you know, it's definitely really manageable and big step up from 26 megapixels. So that about wraps up the video. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please consider subscribing. It would help me out a ton. I would greatly appreciate that. And stay tuned for a video on the XH2 coming out about later this week, maybe in a day or two. Just gonna do a bunch of pixel peeping and first impressions and a bunch of GFX videos coming out after that. So again, consider subscribing if you haven't. And with that being said, I'll catch you all in that next video.